All right, so I'm going to go ahead and spotlight myself. Well, hi, everybody. It's so nice to have you here, especially on such short notice. As I said, I was planning to do something yesterday, which was actually the Lion's Gate, but it didn't work out that way. And I just, in the middle of the day today, decided, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and jump on, and whoever is there is there. And because the reason why, and this happens to me periodically. I'm not as consistent on social media and all of that as I used to be, but every once in a while, there's just something going on in my life, in my clients' lives, um, in the lives of other women I know, especially women that I'm in some kind of spiritual community with, and colleagues. And when I start, and also people that I read and that I follow, and when I start hearing and seeing so many of the same themes over and over and over again, I just am inspired to get on and share that information so that if people don't know some of what's going on in the background, um, hopefully the information will help them understand a little better what's going on for themselves, if their emotions have been sort of up and down, or if their energy has been up and down, or in this case in particular, because of the details I'll share with you in a moment. And as we go through this, there's a lot of things coming up from the past, or sometimes you may be triggered in the present moment and not realize that it's a similar energy from the past that's coming up to be released. I like to say, clean up in aisle 5. You think you've worked on these things before, but they're not always completely cleared out of all of our subtle bodies, our mental, physical, spiritual, or our energy system. And they're sort of coming back again for another opportunity for us to do healing on them. So I'm just curious if anybody wants to say anything about what's been going on for them, if this feels relevant, if you've been noticing any of the things that I've been sharing just briefly, and it doesn't have to be anything real deep or heavy, but just, if there's anything you want to just pop on real quickly, feel free to unmute yourself and just kind of jump in. We'll take a couple minutes. For share, if anyone has anything they want to share, or even a question they might have that maybe I can address during our time together. And again, if you do, just feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. Otherwise, if I don't see anything, or you can also put things in the chat, but honestly, I can't be 100% sure that I'm gonna be able to keep going over to check the chat. So better to just kind of raise your hand, or if I'm saying something that you don't understand, or if a question pops into your mind, you can just raise your hand this way. Or if you go down, there should be a raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, depending on what type of device you're using. So if no one else has anything to start with, I'll just do a quick introduction. I know some of you know me, but there may be people listening to this later who don't really know me so well. So I'll just introduce myself a little bit. So again, my name is Catherine Ewing. My business is called Sacred Heart Alchemy. And then I have a therapy business that's just my own name. So I have sort of two separate businesses, but they're very similar, really. It's just whether you're a therapy client or a coaching client. So I have been on this spiritual journey for myself for about 30 years. As I said, I am a psychotherapist. In private practice for 30 years, working primarily with women and trauma, but in very alternative kinds of ways. I am not, well, I have a master's in social work and I am a licensed clinical social worker, but my training is a little less typical than most traditional clinical. So I use a lot in my work. I've leaned into using a lot of energy healing, alternative modalities. I use a lot of just intuitive tools. I'm an energy healer as well for 25 years now. I use tapping. I use guided imagery, drumming, sound healing. I do speak light language. I tap into the Akashic records. So I use a lot of sort of out of the box tools in my work, whether that's in therapy or in my coaching or group, individual or group classes. Prior to become a therapist, I worked for 10 or 12 years in the areas of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child protective services, where I specialized in child sexual abuse and severe family violence. So I have a pretty solid background in the areas of trauma and violence in people's lives. I'm also an ordained minister of spiritual peacemaking, and although I don't practice as a minister, I believe I just bring that in the peacemaking part, the trying to live from my heart and follow the path of love. I'm also a student of the divine feminine and have been for 25 years. So I bring all of that together in what I do. And, my sort of North Star, my guiding light is really to support women in healing their deepest wounds, understanding themselves as individual aspects of the divine, right? Understanding their divine sovereign nature, helping them rewire and reprogram their brains, their energy systems, regulate their nervous systems, so that they can begin to access and step more fully into who they really are when we take away all the layers of family trauma, ancestral trauma, individual trauma, patriarchal trauma, all the traumas that we all experience, the witch wounding, the sister wounding. We try to heal as much of that as possible so that we can access our true selves and remember why we actually came to Earth at this time. Because I do believe our souls all chose a mission when we came here, and then we came through the veil of forgetting, and now we are well on our way to remembering. And I'll just say, I've believed for about 30 years that we were in this ascension process, and that we were moving toward a tipping point where there would be enough people carrying a higher vibration on the planet that we would be able to start to shift this dense reality that we see here on planet Earth, and that we have all probably spent many, many lives working through. And I truly believe that we have reached that tipping point, and we are at the point where there are so many of us here now on the planet who have come with this vision, with this mission, even if we don't remember it yet, to really shift the energy here and make this a planet of love and light where, we're all living in our highest expressions of ourselves. So that excites me, even though it looks crazy out there. That's sort of my guiding light, and the thing that helps me get up and carry on every day when the rest of the world looks just like a total shitstorm, to be honest with you. So I believe that, I don't know if you have been feeling it as part of this overall energy, but I'm feeling like a quickening. And I know some of that is what's going on politically with the changes we've had over the last month. But I also believe, as I said, that there's an energetic, a spiritual quickening, almost like a cosmic call to action, right? These alignments that I'm going to be talking about over the next, half hour, 40 minutes or so, are really up leveling us. They're bringing in more light codes. They're switching on our spiritual DNA. They're inviting us into our highest evolution and service to humanity, whatever that means to you. For someone, it could be just sitting on their porch, you know, sending joy and peace out into the world. And to others of us, it might be, you know, taking a more active role in some form of work. I know, you know, Charmaine, you wrote a book that's part of your contribution, and I'm sure there's more, you know, that maybe you've been doing or will do. But I know that we're all here to bring our gifts, our intuition, our ultimate higher knowing of ourselves to the forefront. And as I was just remembering being at an event on 7707, and the speaker said, "The time is now when you are ready." And here we are 17 years later, and I'm telling you, the time is now and you are ready. So all that being said, let's talk a little bit, or I'm going to share a little bit about the things that I'm going to explain in more detail as we go along. So, as I said, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on astrologically, cosmically, that's impacting how we're feeling. And probably the simplest of those are these solar storms and flares, and the uprising in the frequency of the Schumann resonance. And I'm not going to go into the science of the Schumann resonance, but basically it measures the vibration of the earth, and it has been growing, getting higher and higher at you know, what do you call those rates when something multiplies and then it multiplies again and multiplies again?
Exponentially.
Exponentially. Thank you. I was thinking like especially. I had all these E words in my head, but it was not exponentially. Yeah. So it's been for years. It was down at like 8 point something, and now it's way up in the hundreds or something like that. So, and it basically measures the light energy that's bouncing off the earth. So we know, and coming from the core of the earth, there's a ratio. So, and that's the Schumann resonance. And then we know that we've been having these solar storms and flares, so much so that we even got to see, some of us, the northern lights here in the, you know, in the lower, I call it lower because it's lower than it usually is, where we see these lights. We were able to see the northern lights, and that's because these solar flares are so strong. So that's one part. And whenever these are remember, these are electromagnetic storms. So anything that's electromagnetic is going to play with your body, because your body is electromagnetic, right? It's why we feel when there's a full moon, and you know, people can sometimes really have a pull emotionally or psychologically when these electromagnetic energies are very strong. So that's the reason I bring the solar flares up, not so much for the northern lights, although they're beautiful, but because they can have a very strong impact on how we're feeling. They can make us feel exhausted or energized. They can make us feel really happy, or, you know, they can have the opposite effect to make us feel somewhat depressed or low. So that's kind of been going on in the background for some time, but they got really strong. In fact, there was a message recently from the fellow who, his name is Stuart Pierce, and he created this oracle card deck, among other things. He's a channel of the archangels, and he had written a piece about the Schumann resonance, just talking about that, and the solar flares, that they're all part of this process of strong energies coming onto the Earth's surface and also into our bodies to help push out the heavy, denser energies that we've all been holding from our own, many lifetimes of trauma or challenge or struggle or ancestral beliefs or fears around scarcity or starvation or punishment or death. And for women, the witch wounding, fear of visibility, fear of being seen. So those storms and flares can contribute to that. The other thing that is happening right now is that there are 4 planets and 1 asteroid in retrograde. And including Mercury, which just went retrograde this week. And Mercury, because it's the one that's the fastest moving and it's closest to the sun, the Earth, we here on Earth generally feel Mercury going into retrograde more than we might feel the outer planets. But let me just say a few things about what it even means to go into retrograde. So retrograde means that in its orbit, a particular planet in relationship to the sun looks like it's moving backwards. Have you ever been on a highway and a car passes you and it almost looks like their tires are moving backwards? Has anybody had that experience? I know I have. But this is what this looks like when a planet stations retrograde. It appears to be going backwards. And while that's a visual illusion, it also has meaning and really noticeable impact on our lives. So, for example, with Mercury, when Mercury is in retrograde, because the planet Mercury rules communication and technology and sort of contracts and legal things, when Mercury is in retrograde, we can find that we may be having difficulties in communication with someone, or our, IT, our computers all of a sudden, or our phones, or, something starts going glitchy or goes offline, or we do a whole thing and then it disappears on us, right? And also you hear people talking about travel during Mercury retrograde. It's not highly recommended because of the likelihood that there will be snafus, right? So Mercury is the one with, as I said, the most influence on Earth. And also because, again, because it has the shortest orbit, Mercury goes retrograde 4 times a year for 3 weeks at a time. So sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, is that happening again? Didn't we just have Mercury in retrograde? We feel its transit in more apparent ways. And, a lot, if you're in kind of certain circles, you'll hear, oh, was Mercury in retrograde? And it becomes kind of a joke. But as I said, for all of the planets in retrograde, from the vantage point on Earth, they look like they're moving backwards. And the planets that are further out can do this for months at a time. They can go retrograde for 6 months of their cycle around the sun. The difficult part of retrograde is just what I said. Each of the planets rules certain things. And so when the planet is in retrograde, those things might be a little wonky. But the flip side of that is that retrograde invites us to slow down. Just think of the word retro, right? We're going back. I think whenever I hear retro, I think of like a diner with a, I don't know, Ford car, an old Ford parked out front and a jukebox thing. I don't know. That's my idea of retro. And rather than just be frustrated about it when these things happen. If you can remember that we're in retrograde, and that retrograde is a time to review, to reevaluate, to revisit, to reimagine things that have happened in our lives before. And then, so we might hear from people we haven't heard from in a long time. We might dream of people we haven't dreamed of before, ever. We might bump into people, or someone might mention somebody. So things may come up from our past. And, you know, so many times with clients are like, why the heck is this person showing up again? Or why am I thinking about that experience again? And this is what I referenced earlier, that when these things happen, it's always an opportunity from the universe to do all the reevaluation stuff or revisiting, and then do some healing around it. Whether, you know, one of my favorite things is tapping, or maybe journaling, or some meditation, or maybe even having a conversation with someone, or just getting out in nature and taking a walk and discharging that energy. I mean, there's lots of ways depending on how heavy or not it is. But it's always an opportunity to have something be revealed so that it can be healed, and we can recommit, or rediscover, or revise our plan, or more our words, right? So whatever planets in retrograde, whether it's Mercury, the other planets that are in retrograde right now are Pluto. And this, interestingly enough, think about what's going on in the world, is the planet of transformation, death, power, control, and rebirth. Now, if that isn't what we're seeing on the big stage of politics, and who's got power and who's in control and what's dying off and what's being reborn, I don't know. Like, to me, that's pretty clear. So we've been in Pluto's been in retrograde from May 2nd to October 3rd. Another planet that's in retrograde is Saturn. And Saturn is in retrograde in Pisces. So it's more emotional, but it's also about bigger change, because it's one of the outer planets. I don't have the specifics here. Sorry, when I was copying my notes, I neglected to save that part. Also, Neptune, the planet of dreams, illusions, spirituality, goes retrograde every year for 5 to 6 months. So we went in July, and July 2nd, and we will finish Neptune will finish its retrograde in December. So there are the energies of art, compassion, a lot of stuff coming up in our dreams and in our spirituality. So each of these planets sort of rules over certain aspects of our life. So depending on what's in retrograde, you may notice different things going on in your life that might be impacted by that. So so we've got Mercury, Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune as the 4 planets. And then Chiron, which for a while was called a planet, and then they decided it wasn't going to be a planet. Now it's an asteroid and a comet, but it is known as the wounded healer. So when Chiron, which also went retrograde on July 26th, actually, which I think was the same day that the Lionsgate opened, this can also mark a period of reliving old wounds. Again, it can be really deeply healing if you understand it and allow those things to come up, to be revealed, to be processed. to have whatever, emotions you need to have around it, to take what seems to be aligned action with it, rather than just being in kind of the victim mentality, like, oh, why is this coming up again? All those things that I already talked about. There's always an opportunity when things are coming back up to ask, why is this coming back up right now? What is the lesson here for me? What still needs to be healed about this so that I can release it once and for all, and not continue to have it in my energy system, or bubbling up to the surface over and over again. And with Chiron, these present day hurts are often old, as I said, old wounds coming up. So it's actually an old wound that's coming up to be revisited and to be healed. But we don't always recognize that. We're just sort of in the space of whatever the present day hurt. But one question that I have found really helpful, and I share this with my clients all the time, is if something is coming up for them, and I've actually been having a lot of this recently. I think part of it is because I'm in a new relationship. It's a newer relationship with someone who I was in relationship 7 years ago. We both went off and had some other experiences, and now we've come back together again. And there's a lot that's coming up for healing and clearing, but also things like, a couple of weeks ago, and some of you may have seen my Facebook post about this, it was the 10th anniversary of my brother's passing. I also had the experience of one of my clients, a young woman, pass away unexpectedly overnight. But for some reason, for all of these reasons, a lot of things from my past have been coming up again for review. The early loss of my parents. And how is that relating to my ability to trust in this relationship? Are there still some loss or grief or abandonment, even though my parents didn't intentionally abandon me, when we experience the loss of anyone we love, especially as a caretaker. And I know some of you know this intimately. As a child, we may have felt abandoned, even though as an adult, we know that's not the case because it wasn't by choice, but a child doesn't know that. So we're in a new relationship, and all of a sudden our abandonment issues are coming up, and we're saying, why the heck is this coming up? Because old unhealed wounds are inviting you to drop in and do the inner child work, do the inner healing work, to really finally sort of put that to rest. So self-reflection and consciousness, higher level thinking. What does this feel? When have I felt like this before? Why is this coming up? What might this be in relationship to, right? These are all great questions to ask yourself or to journal about, bring up in therapy, get someone else's point of view or perspective. I know that helps me to get out of my own head and just talk to somebody else. And sometimes they can have a lot more clarity than I can because they're not so close to it. So at the end of the day, with all this bringing stuff out of the shadow and around into the light, Chiron's entire purpose is to restore wholeness, to heal our old wounds in order to become fully present and fully alive in our lives in the present moment. Some people have referred to the work of Chiron as soul retrieval, and maybe you've heard that term before, because it really is the work of healing and calling back parts of ourselves that we've cut off or shamed or put in our shadow or not wanted to deal with, or perhaps didn't even know what happened there, in some experience where maybe we felt shamed by someone else. Or so all of these parts of ourselves that get separated and denied or shamed or put into the shadow have an opportunity to come back during these times, well, at any time really, but especially when we're working with the shadow energy, with so many planets in retrograde, with all of the pressure from the solar flares that are pushing things up to the surface to be revealed so they can be healed. We really do have this opportunity to gather these parts of ourselves that have been sort of scattered through the universe over space and time. It reconnects things that have been broken, so that they can be mended and reintegrated. And then we get to be more of ourselves. We get to remember more of the truth of who we are. So I think that's all I'm going to say about retrograde, because the most important thing is just know what's happening. With some of these planets, it'll be a while before they go out. We also have some there, Uranus is going to go retrograde in September, Jupiter's going in October, and Mars is going in December. So there's always a rolling deal here with which planets are in and which planets are out. But it can be kind of an interesting to pay attention to. So I'm just going to take a breath for a moment and check in and see if any of you have any questions or comments about anything I've said so far. Is it making sense? Does it all sound like gibberish? Can you relate to it? Yeah, Charmaine.
It's all good stuff. And I didn't realize that I knew we were in Mercury was in retrograde, but I wasn't aware of the other planets. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you're welcome. Actually, I just found out about it this week. And
okay.
Then when I realized Chiron, it was like, oh, okay, we are really getting
Yeah.
we're getting
Yeah.
the real deal here.
Chiron, when you mentioned that, I wasn't aware that it was once a planet and now an asteroid, but is there like a channeler that channels from Chiron? There's some person that sounds
Well, there is an entity known as Chiron, Kyron, and he is channeled by, I just forgot his name, but I've been listening to him off and on for 30 years. That's a different Chiron. This asteroid is Chiron. But you're Lee. His name is Lee. He
okay.
wrote
So
one of the first books on the new kids coming in back in the day in the
Indigo,
80s.
Indigo, those
The
kids.
Indigo Kids. Lee Carroll.
Lee Carroll. Okay, yeah. All right. So just pronounce the same, spell differently, two different
Kyron.
and
Chiron.
no
Yep.
connection.
And
Okay.
this is Chiron.
All right. I didn't know. Thank you.
Yeah, same. No, that was interesting. I hadn't thought of that. So thank you for bringing that. Yeah, anybody else with a thought or a question or a share? The other thing, since we're talking about just moving on before the Lion's Gate, since we're talking about the solar flares, or I was talking about the solar flares and, sunstorms and all the planets in retrograde and sort of the shadow work about that. The other thing is that we've just come through the new moon. So it's the dark moon, and then the new moon comes out. And whenever we're in the dark moon into the new moon, again, it's a lot of that shadow energy. It's the dark side of the moon, right? It's the dark side of our emotional self that is much more accessible and closer to the surface. But once again, the opportunity is to do a deep dive into some of the shadow, some of the darkness, um, as a, in an effort to clear some of that. I sometimes I talk about our septic tanks being full with all the stuff we've accumulated over lifetimes, and then there's no room for higher frequency energy or light to come in, right? So any opportunity, even though it's not always pleasant, right? People don't want to do shadow work. They're like, what do I want to talk about that for? Why do I want to revisit that? Why do I want to go back there? No way, right? Like, blah. But the beauty of it is when we can release, discharge, dissipate, whatever you want to call it, then we do have the opportunity to bring more of the higher vibrating frequencies in. If you've worked with me at all, I talk a lot every day to people about the emotional guidance scale, right? The fact that emotions are energy in motion. Every emotion is just a vibration at a different frequency. It has different chemistry that runs through our body, and it feels differently in our body. And the highest vibrating emotions on the emotional guidance scale, which is an Abraham Hicks thing, or the map of consciousness, which is a Dr. David Hawkins thing in his book, Power versus Force. He studied this for 25 years through kinesiology and muscle testing. The highest vibrating energies are the energies of gratitude, appreciation, joy, love, freedom, compassion, right? Those are the high vibrating energies. And then, they start to get lower and lower in frequency. The first 6 or 7, categories are pretty high and vibrating, and they move through our body quickly, so they don't get stuck. They pop up, they go away, they just move through us. But then we get, sort of down to betrayal and resentment, disappointment, anger, frustration, anger, all the way down to the very bottom where we're at depression, despair, hopelessness, powerlessness, and the very bottom, guilt and shame and despondency. And even as I say them, I think you can feel the difference in the frequency of them, right? So the chemistry that is connected to shame or depression or powerlessness is very different than the chemistry that's connected to joy or appreciation or gratitude. Those move through our body quickly. The others move very slowly through our body. They're often associated with traumatic events. And when we have a trauma, we do this. And that energy literally gets stuck in our energy body, in our physical body. And then because it's so heavy and dense, it never actually does a full circle to get released as the higher vibrating energies do. That's why we have a buildup of these heavier, denser energies. When I talk about your emotional septic tank, where the really heavy ones, the sludge, the slow moving, is at the bottom, and then they move up and up and up and up and up. But if we're full of the heavy, dense energies, there's very little room for the higher vibrating energy for us to actually embody, if you will, those higher frequencies. So, all to say, even though we may not want to do the shadow work, we it's difficult. It takes courage. I honor anybody who's willing to dive in and do the work, really do it, not just talk about it, because it can't be done at the level of talk therapy. I figured that out, 25 years ago. It's got to be done in the body, somatically and energetically, to regulate the nervous system. But it's really the only way we get to step more and more into our highest expressions of ourselves. Yeah, so that was just a little off topic there, but always important. The emotional guidance scale is so critical to my work and how I explain things to clients, because as we go through life on this scale, like in the Abraham Hicks emotional guidance scale, there's 22 levels, I think, and each of us, based on our not only this life experience, as I've come to understand that it's also what we carry in our genetics from our lineage, our ancestors, our mother's lineage, our father's lineage, and then how that all branches off. We do carry some of that, in the level of our DNA. And so that contributes to what I call your sort of personal set point, that somewhere on that range from joy, gratitude, love, appreciation, freedom to shame, guilt, despair, and despondency, we all kind of have a range that that's our set point. That's kind of the place where we naturally hang out. And if we don't ever do the work to heal, to clear what's it's like weights on the side of a boat holding it down. If we don't ever detach ourselves, the boat, from those weights, we can never get any higher in the water. We can't raise our own vibration when we have all of this heavy, dense energy that's kind of taking up space in our field. So let's segue. If unless anybody else has any other questions or comments, we can segue into the Lion's Gate, which, as you may know, yesterday was the big sort of day of the Lion's Gate. It's always 8/8, August 8th, I'm sorry. And it's the Lion's Gate because we're in the sign of Leo right now, Leo the lion. And it's not just that one day. However, it's a portal, a gateway that opens on July 26th and closes on August 12th. But 8/8 is the day that's typically celebrated as the Lion's Gate. And this has been celebrated back from ancient Egypt. The goddess Isis is actually associated with the Lion's Gate. And they used to talk about, it was the time of the year when the Nile River would flood its over the sides and leave silt and everything and create a very fertile soil. So the Lion's Gate is especially associated with fertility, abundance, power, balance, because the number 8 symbolizes abundance, power, and balance. So when whenever we have a double or a triple digit date, it always has a higher frequency anyway, and 8/8 is a higher frequency number. But this year, it's even amplified because the year 2024 adds up to 8. So it was 8/8/8 this year, and that won't happen again till 2033, right? Because that will add up to 8 as well. So there's lots of energy around abundance, new beginnings, new birth, fertility. If you turn an 8 on its side, it's the infinity sign. And so it also represents all of life, infinity. And if you work with this energy, if you do ceremony, if you open up to it, it can really amplify your prosperity consciousness and help you step into the next level. The biggest reason for that, we were talking about light and light coming in during this period of time, during the Lion's Gate, the star system Sirius, Sirius, is positioned such that it's pouring light down onto the earth in a way, that generally is much stronger than at other times of the year. And Sirius, as a star system and as a planetary system, was a very enlightened system. So the light, all light, morning light, evening light, all light has light codes. So during the time of Sirius, in this almost 2-week window, there's all kinds of information coming to us in the form of light codes. And it is, if we have room, if we're open, if we are open to enlightenment and ascension and, upgrading our DNA and lighting up our light bodies and opening our crown and recognizing all of the beautiful codes that are coming in, those codes, as they integrate or come into our energy field, because maybe not right into our physical body right away, but they can come into our field and then gradually begin to work their way into our physical form, because our physical body is the densest of our bodies, right? We have a mental body and emotional bodies, then etheric body, and then this physical body. So it takes time for the light codes to come through, just as it takes time if we have trauma in our energy bodies. Eventually, that trauma will find its way into our physical bodies, and this is what causes pain and disease, right? So it's the same thing with the light codes. But these light codes, again, are what do I want to say? Packets of information that activate our spiritual 12-strand DNA. We're only, as humans, told we only have 2 strands, but that's because the rest have been dumbed down or shut down over the millennia. So these light codes that are coming in from these other planetary systems are literally helping to light up. It's like a switchboard, our light body, right? So we start to have little bits of remembrance, just the same, like the same thing that happens when you see a triple digit number. It's why we switched from analog to digital, because when we see those triple or quadruple digits or patterns of numbers, they are literally unlocking parts of our inner knowing, so that we, again, are more and more remembering ourselves as spiritual beings. So this is the biggest sort of deal about the Lion's Gate. It's really an opportunity to upgrade your DNA, your light body, to move into higher levels of abundance and prosperity. And again, an opportunity to recognize when you're getting triggered, when you're feeling like old stuff is getting stirred up. Well, it probably is. And the reason for that is because of all the light coming in. So it's really an amazing time that we're in right now, between the Lion's Gate, all the planets in retrograde, the storms, the new moon, and it really is an opportunity for us to recognize that we are in such a powerful time right now. We're in a time of initiation. We're being called to be more and more in the truth of ourselves, in the powerful spiritual light body version of ourselves. And in every moment, we have a choice about how we want to show up. Do we want to go back into the old story? Do we want to play the victim? Do we want to stay in the patterns that we know aren't really good for us? Or do we want to step courageously into doing the healing work and the evolving work? And we're really very powerful. We're such powerful beings. I remember hearing the first few times I heard, you are the master of your own life, right? Your thoughts create your reality. And I was kind of like, great. And then I was like, oh, dang, now I really have to be paying attention to my thoughts, to my what I'm saying. I like to say, as Mary Magdalene talked about in the mystery schools, what's coming through the sacred portal of my throat to be what was the beautiful word she used, really to land in the field, into the field of creation. Like, what is it that I'm putting out into that field that is eventually going to manifest? And again, this is a really wonderful period of time to become more and more aware of that, right? Moment by moment, thought by thought, step by step. I like to say break down to break through, action by action. And, and I just generally believe if anybody is interested in what I have to say or kind of follows me, it's because you're here to be a change maker. You're here to disrupt the systems. You're here to break the patterns, right? To shift the timelines. You may not say that in those words to yourself in the same way, but if you weren't called to step into a higher version of yourself, be of greater service to humanity in this time of amazing evolution. If there wasn't something within you that knows there's more than just this 3D day to day, you wouldn't be paying attention to me. You'd be like, what is she talking about? Like, right? So I've got to believe that if you're in my community at all, it's because you are someone, a soul who came here to be an active participant in this incredible evolutionary process that we're in. Roll up your sleeves, do the work so that we can together create that shift, right? Get us to that tipping point, which, as I said, I believe we're there. I just feel it. I just feel like there are enough of us now where our vibration, not in actual numbers, but in our vibration, that we're beginning to tip the scales. And it's really interesting. If you haven't seen the book Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins, he talks about the map of consciousness, and he has a whole comparison chart in the back about how many people it takes at a certain level of consciousness to offset millions of people who are in a denser energy and consciousness. And it's not that many. So I really believe that there are enough of us now who have been doing this work, doing the groundwork, paving, digging the ditches, moving the mountains to create this new level of awareness, this kind of super highway of consciousness that younger and younger people are coming in at, that these numbers are shifting. They have shifted. And that's exciting to me, even in the midst of the 3D world that's falling apart around us. But 30 years ago, I understood that a time was going to come when everything had to fall apart. in order for something new to be born. And I kept thinking, how the heck is that going to happen? How can all of the systems, right? Economics, government, religion, education, monetary, communication, how can all these systems fall apart and then wait around for something new to happen? And in the middle of COVID, I said, oh, guess what's happening? All the systems are falling apart. And now we are in the rebuilding stage. So I was guided. I think I'm going to stop again, just see. I'm going to stop with the informational part and see if there are any other questions. And I was also guided to pull a card from the Angels of Atlantis Oracle card deck during our time together, which we will wrap up in just a couple minutes. I want to respect your time and not go much over this hour here. So I'll just pick a card, see who has a message for us tonight. And all of the archangels are shown as orbs of light in this deck, the Angels of Atlantis deck. And this particular card is from Archangel Gabriel, and it's inspiration. So we'll just pull out the book, see what Gabriel has to say about inspiration. Take a deep breath and visualize your breath as a beautiful blue light filling you. Gabriel will guide you to connect with the flow of the universe, with God's breath. When flow occurs thus, Gabriel removes the tension and holding points that have prevented you from creating love and joy in your life. Inspiration means to be influenced by the divine, spirit. And if you can take several moments to enjoy Gabriel's breath as your breath, relaxation will abound and creative ideas will swiftly flow into your consciousness. Thereby, you will protect the exquisite vulnerability of your soul's truth. All righty. So I think I have probably shared enough information. I did want to leave a few minutes here again at the end if anybody had any questions, comments, anything they wanted to share. Yeah, Crystal, go ahead. Just unmute yourself and. Okay, you're unmuted. Oops, now you muted yourself again. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you get your video back or do you not want to?
Well, I'm afraid to touch it again right now.
Okay, go. Yeah,
You
just
said something about in your deck that the angels are represented by orbs of light.
Yeah.
Is it typical for angels to be orbs of light?
Well, I mean, angels are energy, right? They're just a very high frequency of energy. And even when we see them with wings, often that was just how people were imagining. They could sort of see an energy field and they started, drawing them like wings. I think this was just the particular artist who did the illustrations for this. Like I'll show you a couple different ones for this deck. Each angel has a different color, archangel, and then, the pictures are different, but, and the back of the cards just show. So I think it was just the inspiration of the artist and the author of the deck, obviously, was in agreement with that's how they were going to represent the angels, just as energetic orbs.
The reason I ask is I was sitting here journaling one evening and I caught a glimpse of three orbs of little red orbs float through my kitchen. And I thought I was seeing things. I kind of shook it off and sat here for just a minute and gathered my thoughts and stuff. And then I saw another one. And I
Yeah.
know I saw it.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of wondering,
Well, the
I've
orbs
wondered
are
ever since if that's what it was.
orbs are energy. The first time I didn't see them with my naked eye, but when I was at my first retreat gathering back in 2004 when I was in seminary, somebody took some pictures in the room and there were orbs all over the place.
And this was like when you're pointing like one of them laser pointers, the little bright red dot it makes.
Yeah.
It was like bright red dots, but they were floating in the air. They
Yeah.
weren't against my cabinets or anything. They just literally floated across my kitchen.
Yeah. Sounds like you had
And
some
just
visitors.
poof, they were gone. And like I said, I gathered myself up and, I thought I was seeing things, that I was just imagining things or whatever. And then another one did it when I was, you know,
Yeah,
fully
it
within
wanted to
myself.
confirm for you that yes, you were seeing something, but you weren't just imagining them.
Wow.
Yeah, we're here. We're in your space. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely had my dad, who'd passed about a year ago, was definitely on my mind that day.
Oh,
So I'm wondering if it was just something to do with that.
it would not, it's certainly not out of the question to think that you had, you know, some energy visit you from across the veil.
Well, thanks.
Very nice, lovely.
And I love listening to you. I just want to say that. I
Oh,
just love
thank you.
listening to
It
you.
was so nice to see you.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you, Catherine. This was interesting. Your email came at a very good time, and I'm glad I was free to listen because yeah, I've been feeling it. I've been feeling that tension, it seems like. And it could be because the weather has just been so dense. And
Well, yeah,
coupled with that, so let's say we were having sunny days. I think I don't think I would be personally feeling the effects of it as strongly, just because I happen to appreciate sun more than I do clouds. But
yeah,
and so it's just all interesting that it happens to be coinciding with weather patterns that
yeah,
aren't necessarily so what's the word I'm looking for? Well, there's the light versus the shadow, right?
yeah,
We're
yeah,
seeing more dark days as
yes.
opposed to lighter. So that's all. I just think
Yeah,
that,
no, that's a great observation, Charmaine. And it's also, it's a great grounding thing to say, okay, I'm feeling off. What might be at play here? Well, it could be the weather because it's been raining. I haven't seen the sun, and that can definitely, okay, that's one thing. Might there be something else more than that or deeper than that? So it's always great to really be grounded in what's going on in the real world.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then allowing to go deeper, falling into that, as opposed to trying to get busy or to distract ourselves or to, right?
Yeah.
Going
Yes.
inward and finding that connection to all these things that
Yeah.
you mentioned today. And I think it was like it was a part of an onion. You were peeling back some layers there.
Yeah.
I think
I
that
like
that's
to I like to use the artichoke because it doesn't make you cry as much and there's a heart in the middle.
well, you can stick a piece of bread in your mouth and call it a
The other thing about that, Charmaine, I love when you just talked about the going deeper because, what I have noticed with a number of my clients is that they're all, when they're feeling off, they want to go into self blame or self criticism, or I'm just so anxious, or what's the matter with me? And when I give them some perspective and then add the possibility that from my experience of them, they're highly sensitive, they are likely empathic, and very intuitive. And so they're going to be picking up not only on the energies, but on other people's energy. And that's going to impact their energy. So to not immediately go to sort of self criticism or self flagellation or, you know,
Yeah,
what,
right, exactly.
yeah.
And it's okay to feel more than one emotion too. Just because we're feeling anxious or angry or whatever those negative, we could name it, and then move on and say, okay, what's another emotion that I also can
Right.
appreciate?
We can look for the balance.
Yeah.
And I know you just use the word negative, and I don't want to get nitpicky, but I like to not, I tend not to identify, although a lot of people do, the emotions as negative.
Yes, you're
Some
right.
are denser than others.
Yes, exactly.
We've been socialized to believe we shouldn't feel that way, or we need to push that down, which is why we end up feeling anxious because we're pushing down,
Yes, yes, yes,
right?
yes. I think I didn't mean to say negative.
I know you did. I realize that, but I just wanted
I've
to
been
point
working
it
on that.
out
Yeah,
because it's an important distinction. Yes, they're heavier, denser emotions, but every emotion is just information in our body that tells us we're either in alignment or out of alignment.
yeah. It's almost like a gauge.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank
Okay,
you so
so if
much.
I'm feeling this, what what is it telling me? What is it trying to bring to my awareness?
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
I think in closing, we'll just make it official with our beautiful All righty. Well, thank you all again for being here. I am going to put this up on my YouTube channel, and I may even just send it out in a quick email to the list. But if you've enjoyed it and you think, you know other people who might find it helpful or interesting, please feel free to share. And again, have a beautiful evening, and hopefully we'll get some sun for the next couple of days.
All right. Thank you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye now.